Welcome to this Transform to Net Zero event on what makes an effective Climate Transition Action Plan, or CTAP. I'm David Way, and I lead climate and nature work at BSR. BSR is a sustainable business nonprofit network and consultancy which works with our 330 member companies to build a just and sustainable world. We're proud to serve as the Secretariat of Transform to Net Zero, or TONS, a group of 10 cross-sectorial companies leading on climate, joined by EDF. Our goal as a group is to enable the world's largest 1,000 companies to have targets to achieve net zero no later than 2050, backed by the transformation plans needed to implement them. It is these plans that bring us to you today. An ambitious net zero goal is not worth much unless it is backed by transformative implementation. That is why investors, the climate community, and regulators are now busy defining what a good climate transition action plan is. TONS has a series of transformation guides that articulate approaches to the most difficult problems in net zero implementation, from buyer-supplier engagement to policy engagement to climate justice. In our latest guide, the TONS members assert that a model CTAP has 11 key elements. Can you see them on the screen here? You can see that they are not merely about the short-term investments needed to make science-based emission reductions, but the business model transformation that must underlie any successful landing at net zero. We know that net zero transformation is unique to each company. But if a cross-sectoral group of leading companies can agree to what the key elements are, that is a real-world perspective worth paying attention to. The Transformation Guide also outlines the experiences of 5 TONS members with climate transition action plans, 4 of whom are joining me today, to provide multiple approaches for companies embarking on their own transformation. I encourage you to head to transformtonetzero.org and download it. These are not easy elements to implement, and each TONS member is still working on some of them. But we believe that they are the hallmarks of credible net zero transformation. And at a time when net zero goals are being challenged for being greenwash on the one hand, and for being unrealistic and politically motivated on the other hand, credible transformation is the key to creating lasting value for everyone. And that's why I'm so pleased today to introduce you to 4 leaders from 4 leading companies. To my left and moving left, Elizabeth Brinton, Corporate Vice President for Sustainability at Microsoft, Maureen Graham, VP Responsible Supply Chain at Nike, Nikki King, Head of Sustainability North America at Unilever, and Marcelo Bahar, VP Sustainability and Group Affairs at Natura & Co. So thank you, all 4 of you, for joining us today and for giving everyone your practical advice. I'm especially happy because this is the first time that we, as TONS members and the Secretariat, have met in person, because this initiative started in September 2020 during the pandemic. And let me in particular thank Microsoft for hosting us today. Today, we'll get into the substance together for about 30 to 40 minutes and leave some time for the audience's questions. I also want to encourage you, the audience, to come up to us and to come up to other TONS members who are here after the event and just speak frankly and directly with your peers about the challenges that you're facing. That is part of why we do what we do. So let me get to the first question, and I'll pose this particular question to Nikki because Unilever has a climate transition action plan out that is, I think, well known. Nikki, what does a climate transition action plan do in your view, and how does it relate to your company's overall business strategy?
First of all, this is on. Thank you. That's on now. Thanks for having me. So for us, our climate transition action plan really sets out to define what we mean by our climate targets and how we plan to achieve them. So in a sense, it's a roadmap. It's really meant to provide clarity and about what we set out to do, and it is a public-facing document. It's not a sustainability report, and it's not meant to be a technical expertise document.
Cool. And I think you all of you recognize that thousands of companies have net zero value chain goals. we think far fewer are credibly undergoing the business transformation needed to implement them. One of the elements that we've sort of put into our guide is governance and incentives that drive business transformation. Could I ask each of you how governance and incentives shows up in your climate transition action plan? And it doesn't matter which one goes first. You can align, whatever you like.
I'll start.
Oh,
Hello?
let's just make sure that you have to flip it up.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, we have an integrated governance program that's really important. So we link our financials and our overarching operating principles together to make sure, and we back it up with an internal price on carbon in terms of driving to action. And so I think that's something that's really important, and we've learned, and we actually also continue to raise the price on carbon internally. And so it's making sure that the principles of the plan are followed up with mechanisms around decision-making that drive the movement of money and capital inside the company aligned to the outcomes we want to achieve. So again, just making sustainability very real, very practical, and very aligned to the business model, to your point about business model transformation.
Maybe we'll go down the line.
Sure.
Thanks for the question, David. I think for Nike, the governance piece is critical, and maybe, as Elizabeth said, we're really embedding it throughout the way that we do business. And that means from the functional teams who set and kind of manage the targets all the way up through to our board, who I have the privilege of talking to every quarter about how we're doing on our sustainability targets. I think we've also really tied our performance against those external targets to executive compensation to help really drive accountability in that space.
So governance is also very critical to us. So when we launched our Unilever Compass, which is our integrated business strategy, and this even predated that with the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan, but we know that there has to be governance at the top, and it really starts with our board. So we have a corporate responsibility committee on our board that actually has oversight into the success of our commitments and our CTAP, as a matter of fact. One of the other things that we do is we have a sustainability index that's part of the formula that drives 25% of our employee performance share plan. So it's tied to incentives as well.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thanks for the kind invitation. I don't know if the mic is working.
Yeah, you have to flip it up, I think.
Yeah. Now, there we go. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for the kind invitation. I'm Marcelo, and I work from a company that was based in the Global South, in São Paulo, Brazil. Natura comprises brands like The Body Shop, Aesop, and Avon, that probably you know better. And I think to that point for governance, there is the matter of governance from the board to the organizations, and from the board to how we relate to the world and how we connect to others, the governance up, right? So connecting the board to the organization, Natura has been it made its first carbon inventory in 2005. It got carbon neutrality in 2007. In 2009, it proposed to have the executives' business scorecards related to carbon emissions as well. In 2011, we reached all financial targets, but not the carbon ones, and no bonuses were paid. So I think that proved the seriousness and the commitment with the climate targets. And on the bottom up, I think there is the matter of connecting, like we are doing here, with other initiatives, and especially in the Global South, because there is no way that we can have net zero companies, but not a net zero world. So it's all about making the others joining that movement as well, and not only about what we're doing on ourselves. And the final comment on governance is around movements like the B Corp certification, which combines not only what you are doing, but how the stakeholders are seeing what you're doing and scoring them across sectors, across companies. And Natura is part of that movement for quite a while, so I think that's important as well.
Yeah, very exciting. 4 very strong governance and incentives approaches, all a little different, all geared at business transformation. So no doubt establishing a business-wide climate transition action plan is difficult. It must be a complex endeavor. You have to harness different functions, all of the business units. Can I ask how your plan engages different functions or business units to lever emissions out of the value chain? And I might go to Nikki first on this, and then maybe Marcelo after.
Sure. So at Unilever, we have a sustainability model of action that we use, and it's 4-pronged, right? It starts in our own operations. then it goes to the value chain, our brands, and how we influence wider society. So we use that as a filter when we think about how we implement sustainability. So when you think about that approach, you think about in our operations, the teams that have to be involved in that. So it's supply chain, it's procurement, it's environmental safety and health. So it's all of those teams. And then when we move up to the brands, it's really our brand teams and our marketing teams and how they bring sustainability to life in their brands. There's research and development that comes into play, how we're making our products more sustainable. So really, in order to do this well, you have to engage all of your different teams across the organization. That also includes finance. Definitely can't leave finance out because they're key to that.
Yeah, so at Natura & Co, we were formed by companies on very different levels on the carbon journey. So Natura has been on that journey for quite a while. The other brands that joined later were in different stages on that journey. So in order to put everyone together and to review our emissions on scopes 1, 2, and 3, we established a network of excellence on sustainability, we call the SNEX, and we connect the 4 brands with the 4 areas: procurement, research and development, supply chain, and sustainability. So we review everything together and everyone knows where we are in terms of our value chains. And then with that, we are able to set the transition clearly per a different line on logistics, on our materials that we supply, on our, especially on raw materials, because there is this, on our case, very important connection between what we do on nature and what we do on carbon, since Natura operates in the Amazon region, and Amazon deforestation is one of the biggest offenders nowadays for carbon emissions. So connecting those dots, it's super important for us.
It's really super. When I think about a function that does need to be harnessed, I think about product design and innovation. So I want to ask a question about how that plays into net zero transformation. I imagine that creating a product or innovating a product is a complicated process also. How do you make sure that sustainability is kept top of mind throughout this complicated process? And I might ask Maureen and Elizabeth to comment on that.
Sure, and it's a great question, and I think to echo what my panelists just said, it's so cross-functional, and it's really important for us to take an enterprise view of the entire climate impact that we have end to end, and then really target the carbon hotspots for us. So in the Nike value chain, there's really 2 large areas, and one is the materials that we choose, and the second is the supply chain and kind of how we manufacture those products. And the materials that we choose are really dictated by our design and product teams, who are always looking for the most innovative materials to use in our products. We actually just launched a new type of material called Forward, and I have one in the back if you're interested in touching it later because it feels really cool. That really, I think, shows the nexus of that innovation for athletes and the way that we're trying to innovate for sustainability. It's the way that it's created uses 75% less carbon than our traditional knit. So our product teams and our material teams are really working on pushing the innovation agenda to ensure that we're meeting our sustainability goals. And that integration across the end-to-end enterprise is so important in how we think about meeting those goals in our 2030 science-based target and eventually our 2050 net zero goal.
I will just say that I would love to touch the material afterwards. And Elizabeth, do you have anything in the back for us?
Well, I can show you my Surface. And we also, it's a plug actually we're part of our innovation center here. So in our lobby, we have some amazing examples. When you came up the elevator, the lifts, and if you, instead of coming here to the left, if you went to now our right, you can see some really great examples of some of the innovation that we're doing around technology and sustainability. And I think, building on this is that it's not separate any longer. And so it's a multivariable problem that we're solving with innovation, that it includes all the best of the cool and sexy aspects of innovation that we all love, combined with doing the right thing for people and planet. And so, to me, that's really exciting about where we are collectively in terms of the commercial sustainability journey. It's about action. And so if you think about for Microsoft as a large software company, it's about how we actually have low code, no code, how we actually are pushing the envelope of the art of the possible mathematically and with compute. And so we think of ourselves as well from a sustainability perspective, solving how we meet our own disclosures and exceed them and do better is actually the test for then our own software. We are customer number one. So if we think about the Cloud for Sustainability that we went to general availability for our customers earlier this year, that's coming out of a decade of really hard wrestling within Microsoft of, okay, how do we measure? How do we set a price on carbon? How do we actually accelerate our own journey? And I want to hark back on another aspect on governance, which is transparency. One of the things that we take very seriously at Microsoft is sharing the journey. This is a journey and it's complex. And so if you do look at our sustainability report, we're very honest about, where we're exceeding, where we're meeting, and where we're behind and why we're behind. And I think that's something that's really important for us all to collectively to have the conversation. This is what's so great about TONS as well, is that this is complex, and all of us in the commercial sector, we're for-profit listed companies. Our shareholders expect growth. And so how do you have profitable growth and actually reduce water, reduce your carbon emissions, save, be water positive, which is one of our goals as an example. And so with that drives innovation right to the core of the business. So for us, it's a one Microsoft journey. And in terms of product, it makes us also take ethical stands around certain technologies like blockchain. We don't do it because it's high compute. It burns a lot of energy. So what we're pushing the envelope on are alternatives. How do you actually accomplish the transparency of a secure ledger and advanced internet without having the deleterious energy consumption issues? How do we make sure that in the global south and everywhere around the world, there is the opportunity for education and compute and these types of things on a very practical basis? So in a nutshell, it's embedding innovation. It's embedding the multivariable problem solving into everything you do, whole of company, which makes, I think, the time we're all in commercially incredibly exciting.
This is super. We've talked now already a bit about incentives and compensation, a bit about innovation. Those are two very clear inputs into net zero transformation. I want to ask if any of you have a comment on company culture, on not just saying that all of your employees are behind your goal, but getting your employees' hearts and minds behind your goal. And anyone who wants to jump in can.
So clearly that's important as we're all jumping in. At Unilever, it is critically important for our sustainability, for our employees to be engaged in sustainability. And I must say that everyone that I've spoken to, so I've only been there a little over a year, but everyone that I talk to understands what it means and they know what they need to do when it comes to our goals. So I think one of the things that we do is our employees need to understand their purpose. So we help our employees understand their purpose, which makes them even more engaged in the work that we're doing. And I think that building that sustainability culture is the only way that you're going to be successful in implementing your goals.
Yeah, so totally agree. And at Natura & Co, what we saw was we've been on the carbon journey for quite a while, but it's hard to get to people and to get to everyone. It sounds a bit too abstract, and now it's getting even a bit controversial. So we thought it was important to move a little from carbon emissions into carbon emotions. So to get people to understand what it's all about, how it connected to their lives, how it connected to Brazil. And one of the main things that we can contribute to is stop and halt deforestation. So then we start to place numbers for people to understand what we were talking about. The world has around 4 trillion trees. 390 billion of them are in the Amazon region. 500 million are being chopped down every year. So today, 1 million trees will go down. So to get people to understand that, we place this gigantic billboard, 50 meters to 20 meters. Someone has to help me with the scales. gigantic billboard. So it's like a building-sized billboard in front of the Brazilian Congress with the countdown of trees and the number it represents for carbon emissions. So people really understand what we are talking about and what's the connection of everything we are doing, they are doing, and decision-making process is doing to really get visibility on how carbon connects to their lives. So that's one angle. The other one, more specific to our employees, with LinkedIn, we do specific training. And of course, there is all the carbon calculators for all materials. So every manager, when they have to think about, I'm going to develop a new line, they have to calculate the carbon emissions it will represent and how that connects to everything they're doing inside the company. So connecting those dots, I think, is the best way to create a culture that will change somehow the perception of carbon.
Well, it's just absolutely awesome. I want to see that billboard. That's amazing. It really comes to a fundamental thing. A picture's worth 1,000 words. And Aaron, we were talking about this earlier before the event started, how we have an obligation, I think, to simplify the language and to really bring it home and make it real and practical in the human lives of everybody. And so one of the things we're doing internally with culture is that first and foremost, Satya, our CEO, has called out sustainability holistically as a key pillar for our company overall. And then we have an employee community, and that is a grassroots global community with thousands, tens of thousands of Microsoft employees all over the world. And as what's been shared is that we're making it very tangible into, it doesn't matter what your quote day job is or what your title is or what your level is, that you have a role and a contribution and a way to contribute in terms of decision making, how you're thinking about your work, and building that inclusive community and also listening to them. And I join on a quarterly basis at a minimum and oftentimes more into this employee community. And I mean, we are having a privilege of amazing, smart, motivated people, and they are like direct. And so it's awesome. They push us in the most wonderful way. And then I think the other thing that's really important about that is then turning that push into action and having a loop back and a report back. And so we use our tools. We use our new tool called Viva that's part of Teams. And so we use and weave that in LinkedIn, of course, and communicate that back. And so individual employees can see how they've directly contributed to actually the progress of the company. And I think that is really important and awesome. And it builds that sense of, okay, it's complex, but we're all in it together, and we can each individually make a difference. And that just makes it fun and builds that energy. It's like a movement. And so as we harness that movement in our companies, that accelerates the change. And it's amazing, too, where I was talking to an amazing engineer who could be my son. It's like humbling. Anyway, and he was like sharing this innovation of this approach methodology to how he's thinking totally differently about a way to, model an aspect of code. And it's not his quote day job, but he feels included. He feels permission by the company to innovate that way and then share it. And so then we can I can use my position, and this is what we're all about as leaders, is then to really amplify and then connect across these massive global corporations, okay, who he should actually talk to in engineering to actually bring it to life. And that feedback loop then becomes incredibly powerful.
I have to round us out. I think you can see how much excitement there is around this question. And it's interesting to hear how similar actually all of our approaches are. And there's lots more for us to talk about as well offline. But really at Nike, we've, I think, deputized our whole company to feel like they can work on sustainability, because it's not just our sustainability team's roles, it's everyone at the company. And a couple years back, we launched our Move to Zero campaign. I think you can see that in some of our branding with our product as well. But really the sharp point on moving to zero carbon and zero waste across our entire enterprise. And we have employees kind of giving suggestions and a Move to Zero challenge for employees to come to us with their best ideas that we can then integrate into our planning. And so it's really a grounds up movement, making sure that, again, from the top down, sustainability is a core priority for the company and has been for, we just celebrated our 50 years, which is crazy. But then really making sure that every single function and every single employee at the company really feels like they're part of the journey, because they are. And so that's how we're going to make the change that we want to see.
Super. For those of you who like large billboards, BSR's office until recently was at Union Square, and if you go and visit Union Square, you will see an enormous, what used to be an enormous digital clock that now counts down and has for a long, long time the number of years, months, and days, hours, and minutes, and seconds until the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold is passed permanently for us. And it is, so if you enjoy that, it is a sobering experience. It tells us that the task is incredibly urgent. The task is also incredibly difficult. So we know, and I think those of you in the audience know, that all companies have emissions in the value chain that can only be indirectly influenced. Ones that you don't have direct control over, that will keep sustainability leads up at night thinking about their Scope 3 goals and how on earth they are going to go and meet them. So I want to ask this question: how are you tackling the most difficult points in your value chain? What tools are you bringing to bear to that incredibly difficult task? And I might go to Maureen first on this.
Well, this is a very complex challenge, and I think this is literally my job. So thankfully, I've got an amazing team working on this with me. But I think what I mentioned earlier, if we look at our entire value chain, it's about 95% of our emissions are in our supply chain. And within that, it's really the two kind of big hotspots of the materials we use and then how we manufacture them, or the energy and water, et cetera, used in the manufacturing process. Luckily, we've been working with some amazing suppliers for over 30 years. So I think the first piece of how we're tackling this is really these long-standing relationships with suppliers that really share our values and share our ambition to get to net zero. We launched a program in 2019 called our Supplier Action Climate Program that allows these suppliers to engage with us in a way that we actually set science-aligned targets in their Scope 1 and 2, which is the majority of our Scope 3. So we now have about a dozen of our largest and most strategic suppliers who have these science-aligned targets and are working with us on our move to zero work. And that really helps that accountability, again, across the supply chain. I think the second piece that we're tackling is the financing that we really need to get to that decarbonization. And we have a partnership with the International Finance Corporation, who is actually providing preferential rates for the suppliers that we work with in our SCAP program and other leadership programs within the sustainability space. So again, tying the incentives all the way through our value chain. And then the final roadblock I think that we really need to tackle together, again, in partnership with the TONS group and many others, is policy in our source-based countries. So the majority of our emissions really comes from the grid factor in a country like Vietnam or Indonesia, where the majority of our product is made. And until we can get to a fully renewable grid in those countries, we won't be able to hit our own net zero targets. And so the policy advocacy piece is so important. And again, not one that we're doing alone, but rather engaging in many other forums to make sure that we have the right voice at the table to enable that transition.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that, and I think that policy piece is critical, right? But I think this is something that keeps all of us up at night, all of us that are really trying to drive this work. So for us, like Nike, a majority of our emissions are in our value chain. We know that over 60% of our emissions are related to the sourcing of our ingredients and our packaging, and it's incredibly difficult to tackle alone. So we launched a climate promise program to our suppliers, where we ask them to have their emissions by 2030, to report progress on the emissions, and to share their product footprint data with us. And you know, something that we know is 80% of our suppliers, we have 54,000 suppliers across the world. It's a lot of suppliers, and they come in all shapes and sizes. They're all in varying degrees in their journey. We know that 80% of those suppliers do not have climate goals, and only 10% of them have science-based targets. So, so it's an incredible, journey that we're going to have to go on. But what we're doing is we're focusing. So we have about 300 suppliers that make up a majority of that footprint, and we're focusing on those suppliers, and we will provide them with resources to help them along their journey.
Yep. Building on that, similarly, it really starts with, and of course, as Microsoft, with data. And so first and foremost, it's about, we're committed to providing the practical software tools that help our value chain actors actually participate. And so in terms of supply chain upstream, in terms of input products, that's easier to control because frankly, we can all sort of vote with our checkbook and also with contracting. And I think this goes into how we make things very real. We've changed how we contract. We have now 87% of our upstream input suppliers. We have their data. Building on what you were saying, Nikki. And so we're building that real ecosystem that helps those suppliers be successful. We have really good education materials and guidance and even technical support. Now, the biggest part is the value chain, the circularity, the actual downstream, and we are a consumer products company as well. And there's so much there you can't control. So then it's thinking about, well, what can we control to influence within the larger value chain in terms of, supporting things like e-waste and circularity, and how do we make sure that there's a market for that and that the economics work. And so that's a huge area that's very complex, keeps us up at night, and there's a lot of work to be done. But I think it's really important for us to unpack the difference between value chain, which is, at the end in the circle, and then the supply chain in the up. And really thinking through, again, aligned to the business model and what you are actually purchasing and coming in as inputs, how you can unpack that, how you can actually take a lot of control and influence and help in that area, which is actually simpler. But then I think collectively, and I think this is where we all have a lot of work to do, and I was in another conversation yesterday around Scope 3 with the larger value chain. I think this is where we need to come together as a global society and make sure that part of the just transition and social equity includes that use, because at the same time, consumers, wherever they live, if they're in Tanzania, like we're a gaming company, they should be able to play games just like, someone here in Manhattan, if it's fun, right? So how do we make sure that there are the systems and the network infrastructure in terms of waste recycling and those types of things that no matter where you are, because this is a very controversial topic, but a lot of areas in the global south have been the garbage bin for lower efficiency products like refrigerators or other things in the past. And so I think that's where we as leaders also have to stand up and say, okay, how do we enable economic participation anywhere in the world and at the same time build the systems, which include transport and et cetera, to actually create new economies and new jobs around circularity that does the right thing, and it can actually lift up and create new jobs, new works, and so it creates a virtuous cycle wherever it is in the world. And so a lot of work to be done, but something we're leaning into.
And just to build on that, which I think it's great that we're together with peers in that dialogue. And my perspective is, on the carbon road, we know the instruments. So we already know the scientific panel, IPCC from the UN. We know what's going on with carbon emissions and where we are in terms of ppms and all those metrics from science. I think in terms of public sphere, we know where we are. The Paris Agreement set the national disclosure on carbon for every country, so we know globally where we are and where we are heading to, under which pace. So we have public targets already set. On the private sector, we evolved a lot. So we have science-based targets, and we can enroll and check how we are curbing or not emissions in absolute terms. So private sector knows where it's going to. On financials, we do have TCFD in place, so the Task Force for Financial Disclosure, that can assess the risks. And so that is set. What is lacking, I think, from my perspective? To do the same with nature, for sure. So to have all those 4 metrics aligned. And there are many acronyms for that, so I'll spare everyone from the acronyms. But they must be aligned as well, because we cannot have a Scope 3 transition done by just moving the energy factors if we do not consider that the biggest mega biodiversity is within the Global South and with nature. There will be no Paris Agreement without tropical forests and no tropical forests without the Paris Agreement. One thing connects directly to the other. So that's super important. And on Scope 3, what is really lacking, north or south, is technology that will allow carbon sequestration while we produce things. The transition to net zero shouldn't be a transition that would restrain us from doing things. It should be a transition that would allow us and impose us to do things differently. So that's the real challenge I think we have ahead, is how to set regulation and innovation on that same direction.
So I have a sort of a connected follow-up question to this. I've mentioned that the goal of TONS is to have the world's largest 1,000 companies have net zero goals for before 2050, backed by the transformation plans to achieve them. And that does require doing things differently. And I want you to imagine you're sitting down for coffee, and in front of you is a sustainability director at one of the world's largest 1,000 companies. Their sustainability function is quite new, not like yours. Their company doesn't have the experience you have. They don't have the experience you personally have. They still face the same challenges. They have to implement a net zero value chain goal. They have to communicate progress to investors through a CTAP. What advice are you going to give them, practically speaking, across this coffee table?
I'll jump in. Well, first of all, we're here and we can help, with data. It starts with data. You have to understand and measure and create a baseline. And so I think, again, kind of going with my theme about making sustainability real and practical, my best advice would be to any company, your business, your business model, your cap table and your financial framework. If you're a listed company, how, the capital markets reward you or punish you. And so being very practical, if you look at just knowing your company, you're already very, very far along on the way, because then you can say, okay, how do I start? What are my biggest levers? So you start with data, measuring where you are, creating a baseline. And then, depending on the business model, and this is why it's so important, and I love what you were saying, Marcelo, about we have to look at nature and the social aspect broader, because to get to where we need to do as a planet, if you look across enterprise, they're so distinct. The business models are so different. So in some cases, electricity consumption or energy may be the biggest carbon emissions lever. For a different type of business, it may be water. For yet another business, it actually may be the social construct of who their workers are and making sure that things are ethically built or made. The diversity is vast. And so it's my conversation over coffee would be like, okay, take a deep breath. Let's unpack it. Be very, very practical. Understand based on your business model. Let's create a baseline using data, and then turn that data into you're already, as a leader, a proven good decision maker. So now it's then saying again how you map it with your financial decision making, what you're doing around innovation and your business model, and then building a practical game plan. That may sound very simplistic, but it's, you can't swallow an elephant in one bite. You have to be able to just unpack it in a very pragmatic way. And so that's what my advice would be. And also to say, you're not alone, and create community. Have them join TONS.
I think that's great, Elizabeth. And the piece I would add is, again, that not being alone, right? And so just that, as you see here, a lot of us are already collaborating. We're not going to do this by ourselves. And so I'd say for any company who's just embarking on this journey, we've all learned a lot and made mistakes along the way. So don't be afraid to reach out and leverage this community and others to make sure that we're doing this all together.
I agree with both of you, and that's pretty much what I was going to say. But I also think that it's important to understand it's okay to not get it perfect the first time, right? You have to start somewhere, because the cost of inaction is far worse.
Yeah, I read a month ago a piece at The Economist with a lot of critique to ESG, and to saying that the main point was just to count and to hit carbon emissions. And I couldn't disagree more, because there are a few other points that are super important and important for new directors and for people who are joining that space to understand the connection between what the business is doing and their license to operate, and how that relates to carbon emissions, but to other things that are connected to carbon emissions as well. So knowing where you are first, I think it's the first point is assessing how you are performing with your license to operate with carbon lenses. This is where everything starts. once you get there, look at around you. Probably you have some of your peers who are already doing the same or who are already in the journey. Try to join them. I think that the worst thing to do is to first set your goal and then start running towards that goal. First, you have to understand where you are, because you have always the possibility to try to hit the target but miss the point. In order to really get to the point, first is connecting to others, so as everyone said, but assessing precisely where you are on that and how the nature of your business impact everything you're doing. So I think that would be my suggestion.
Super. I want to turn to another very practical question now, which is, do you believe a climate transition action plan should be a standalone document? And how often do you think that plan ought to be updated? Seems very block and tackle. Maybe I'll go to you, Nikki, first.
Sure. For Unilever, it makes sense for us that it's a standalone document. I mean, it's a practical document. It's not meant to, update your climate progress. It's not meant to be a risk assessment. It's meant to be a layman's term guide on what we're planning to do. So for us, it makes sense for it to be standalone. Your sustainability report, totally different, right? And for us, we plan to update it every 3 years. It's a forward-looking document, and we have long-reaching goals in there. So you've got to give those goals some time to, for you to make some progress. So we plan to update in 2024. And one of the things that we also did that I didn't share earlier is we put ours before an advisory shareholder vote. And we were one of the first organizations to do that, and it passed with 99% of the vote. We were extremely surprised by that, didn't anticipate that, but I think that really sent a clear message. So when we update it in 2024, we'll do the same thing again.
And you're going to get 99.7% of the vote in 2020.
Hopefully it'll be 100.
Fair. Let me ask all of you before I close sort of with some remarks and then turn to audience questions. I mentioned that all the TONS members are working on some of the 11 key elements still. So I want to ask you, what isn't sort of in your climate transition action plan now that you think you're working on and that you'll improve in a subsequent version that you might turn to later on? Does anyone want to give us a sense of that? Maybe I'll go to Nikki first too, and then see if others want to come in.
Thanks, David. So for us, we know that we need to address, in our next iteration, we need to address climate justice and the just transition. So that'll be included in our next plan.
I think for us, for Microsoft, it's just continuing to deepen with specificity. So it's very similar to what you were saying, Nikki, is that we're learning all the time. And so then being able to, as we learn, we can add more detail, which we see it as well as a really important education document. So
I think from our perspective, there is this global, complex and difficult discussion on carbon pricing. So as you have carbon pricing from different markets, and now finally, after COP26, the global carbon market is beginning, not sponsored yet, but beginning. So I think connecting our activities to carbon pricing will be, for everything we do, will be our next step.
You can see we're all kind of at different phases of our journeys here. I think for Nike, we don't have an externally facing action plan. We have our targets, obviously. So I think even just talking to Nikki yesterday about this, I love what Unilever's done in this space. And so that education and kind of storytelling around the action plan is really interesting, and how we can engage to our employees better. So that's something that I'm taking away from even just the last 24 hours talking to my peers here.
All right, well, before I turn to the audience, let me thank all four of you again. I think you've drawn out a lot of tools from your pockets, and you've laid them in a toolbox, for other companies tackling the same challenges. Climate transition action plans, they're not abstract. We can see, and you only have to look at the news today or any day in the last several months or over the summer to see that climate impacts are accelerating, they are damaging our economies, they are dislocating people, they are contributing to a volatile and challenging business environment. And we all know that the science shows that these impacts will only continue to increase in frequency and in intensity. And at the same time, we face economic headwinds, we face geopolitical instability, and we face political polarization. Through all of this, the Transform to Net Zero members remain committed to achieving net zero well before mid-century. And the Climate Transition Action Plan is the plan which makes those commitments real. It will be essential to the creation of resilient and innovative businesses that create lasting value for everyone. With that, I'd love to try and filter some questions from the audience. So feel free to raise your hands, and then I will begin to point. And if you could, when you ask your question, stand up, identify your name and also your organization. That'd be very helpful. And I already see 5 hands, and I'll start right here with you, ma'am. Yes, please do stand up and then speak. Try to yes, and there will be mics coming around, so you do not have to yell your name and your affiliation.
Is that working? Yeah. Hi everyone. My name's Bethany Ridley. I'm from UK government. I work in the Department for Environment, and part of what I do is very much focused on embedding nature into net zero transition planning. That's government planning, that's also corporate and financial sector planning as well. So I was very pleased to hear what you were talking about in terms of deforestation, Marcelo. I guess, you know, the science is clear. We know that unless we keep forests standing, we're not going to keep net zero in reach. We're not going to keep 1.5 alive. So I suppose my question to you collectively is what you're doing to embed nature in your own transition planning, collaboratively or individually. Thank you.
So my instinct is to go to Marcella first and then see if the other 3 have any comment.
Thank you so much for the question. And Lord Zach Goldsmith has been an important person to discuss those topics with. He was part of the World Economic Forum with us in the Champions for Nature initiative. I think there is always one example that I use that explains, and I think it helps business to understand what can we become, how do we operate to become nature positive. So there was in the Amazon forest this tree that was on the verge of extinction. It was called ucuba. Its wood was being used to produce broomsticks and roofs in the southern part of Brazil. We got in contact with the community. We understood that we could use its fruits to produce a whole new line of products, and we start paying the community 3 times more for half of its seeds than what the community would get for the wood. Immediately, the community stops chopping and starts to plant. So that's regeneration in very practical terms, and that's how can you embed nature into the business. Of course, when you have a nature positive action, it does also reflect on your carbon emissions. And that's the connection that I think we are missing. And I think because of, unfortunately, a lot of greenwashing that has been done, nature-based solutions became a concept that must be rebuilt. But we cannot drop that concept by any chance, because that's where we'll really make the difference between what we're doing as business and how we're operating with nature, connecting nature and carbon. I think that's for us a must and something that we are very active on.
And I'll just build on that as well. One of the things that Microsoft has done is we've really leaned in to publish very, very high quality and differentiating standards for carbon offsets. So that way we're making sure that the quality, whether it's from nature or an engineered solution, actually deliver what it says it delivers. And so you can go to our website, you can look at the quality standards, we've published guidelines, we've updated them as well. And so because this is really, really important, and then it also goes back to track and trace and provenance, being able to prove that, to your point, Marcelo, as well, sadly, nature-based solutions got caught in a lot of controversy, and so that's where we've also leaned in on the quality standards and make sure that, again, there's the right science-based accounting for, you know, what reforestation really delivers and what, you know, tree health, you know, given drought situations, how it actually is measured. And I'll give a plug here for our planetary computer. We have leaned in and invested with our own dollars and capital and IP to actually build a digital twin for the planet using indexable satellite imagery and data, so we can understand where there are, you know, the health of forests. And this is something, it's a larger conversation, but it goes back to investment in asset managers. Because of poor data and accusations from, you know, other folks that are, you know, not supportive, shall I say, large asset managers that invested in forestry have started to pull out, big pension funds and others. And so I was in a conversation with one of the big pension fund managers recently of how we can apply technology so that investors continue to invest in the commercial aspects of forestry and tree health and everything that support carbon in a profitable and practical manner. And so, and I also just from a British perspective have to give a plug to the UK, the British History Museum, Natural History Museum. There is such an amazing wealth of science and information about biodiversity. And so thank you for what you guys are doing there and supporting the world with that data and information. It's really important.
Cool. Hands up, yep. If you could stand up and just, again, say your name and your affiliation before you ask your question.
Jeff Crawford with Sistana. We're a Blackstone portfolio company. First of all, just a huge thank you to BSR for assembling such a great group of panelists here. And a shout out to Unilever. If you haven't read their transition plan, I highly recommend it. I've used it as a reference myself many times. Building on the other participants' question, just wanted to ask, given the release of the Task Force of Nature-Related Financial Disclosure beta framework that came out here, how are your companies approaching integrating nature in your scenario analysis, similar to how many of you have done with the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures? Thank you.
So again, I don't know. It's up to you, Marcelo. I'm also happy to reply, but you can start if you like.
I'll be brief, I promise. I'm part of the group that is on the TNFD framework, that is building the TNFD framework. And I think this is fundamental because it's the only way that we can not only value but assess risk on nature loss. But what we're trying to create is not only the risk assessment, but also the possibilities for us to, with that same framework, build solutions for investors to evaluate their capital and the finance that they are allocating, how much this will benefit nature and which ecosystems it will benefit in which way. So to be more connected to that, we are 100% inside TNFD, and we are building our own beta framework for Natura & Co as well. And I strongly encourage all companies to take a look at the TNFD website. So this is a way for us to evaluate where we are and to assess how each company is operating towards its own ecosystem. So thank you so much for the question.
Yeah, and before we move on to the next question, let me let me plug the BSR in anticipation of helping our member companies with this subject, has launched a team on nature. And of course, we see the inbound next year on the SBTN and the TNFD, among other initiatives. All right, next, who else? Sir, yep. And then I'll go to you, sir, and then you, sir. Sorry, so 1, 2, 3, yep.
Hi, I'm Roman Boli with South Pole. We're one of the leading carbon offset project developers and work with companies along their climate journey from A to Z. And one challenge that we hear often with companies when we speak, especially to sustainability directors, sustainability managers, and I assume you might have been in this situation before, is we have great ideas, but how do I convince my board? How do I convince my CFO? How do I convince my senior leadership not only to set very ambitious targets that will transform the business, but then also implement specific milestones? So maybe if we go back to the coffee scenario from before, what would your advice be to a new sustainability director, how to convince senior leadership? Thank you.
That's a great question, and I think the simple answer, or simplistic perhaps, is just tie it to it's a business imperative. I think a lot of the work that we do, particularly in the supply chain, and we have these conversations with our suppliers very frequently, it's about climate resilience, it's about business continuity and making sure that you're ready and prepared for the next couple of years and what we're going to face. So at the end of the day, all of the business cases that come through my team and that I kind of bring up to our executives are related to what is the business case and how do we make sure that we're ready for the future.
And I'll just totally agree and just add that when you're having a board level, and I'm an experienced publicly listed company board member, so I can put that hat on, look at how boards are structured. So boards have an audit committee, and part of audit committee and governance at a listed company board, and this is consistent around the world regardless of exchange, is you have to have a risk heat map. And so I think on a very practical basis, every NED or board director understands that they have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that the company has a capability to provide shareholder value and deliver financial return over time. So it's a financial aspect of sustainability. And so just building exactly what you were saying is that it is no longer one or the other. And so, boards get it. Board members get it. And, now I'll put a plug in for CA 100 Plus, and there's several other amazing organizations that are providing education to investors and shareholders and board members as well. Another shout out to the FTSE. I think the UK has done an incredible job of providing great material for board directors on the topic of ESG, and so it's really no longer a conversation that's outside. But I think the key comes back very pragmatically to how capital markets and therefore board committees are structured. It's about risk. And it's about tying to the business model, and it's about making sure that there's an understanding around what the risk heat map is, how that ties to the business model, how it ties to, again, how shareholders and investors look at a particular industry sector. And I think, sorry, I'm going to add another little point here, but this is where, organizations, it becomes so important to enable companies to get credit for the good things they're actually doing and take a step back away from judging a particular sector because of one actor. Companies are really different across sectors and industries, and so that's where board members get very, very afraid. And so it's about turning this into opportunity and then collectively using associations and consortia and good organizations to actually get the right facts out there, and not make sure that whole sectors, and this is where we have to continue to work to educate the analysts that look at sectors. They look at a whole group and they go, oh, plus, minus, based on a whole category. And so that's where we have to also step out of the boardroom conversation into the investor conversation, provide good materials, good education, and frankly, having the leaders of the biggest asset managers stay the course and not get wobbly. So I'll stop there.
No, great answer. You, sir, and then I will be coming to you.
All right, my name is Antti Vihavainen. I'm from Puro Earth, one of the companies that has delivered negative emissions or carbon removals to Microsoft. Regarding the internal price on carbon, it would be great to hear your thoughts, what it should be, why, and how the money should be spent.
Sure, and after Elizabeth responds, I'm also going to see if Nikki wants to respond. It's up to you. I know Unilever has. Okay, all right, never mind.
First of all, thank you very much. We appreciate the support. Again, very practically, it's about having a price that the way we look at it is first from a science perspective and in a practical economic perspective, what is going to be a stretch? And so we look at a methodology that is a combination of science first and then economic fundamentals to look at how we stretch and push ourselves. And I'm not going to go into further detail on what a price should be, but I think and this conversation is really important, and I think this is a larger public conversation around how you have a broader impact around what is around carbon. And I think that is something that when we talked about nature and we talked about other things, water, so one of the things we're wrestling with is how do you have the right mechanisms that cover the real problem? And it kind of goes back to, Marcelo, something you said that I loved, is making sure that you're not just setting targets to chase and missing the whole point. And so I think that's where the economic levers and incentives, both the carrots and the stick inside an operating company, become important, and they have to be aligned to the practicality. I sound repetitive, but the practicality of how a particular business model actually runs, and then make sure that you are putting the right structures in place. In some cases, it's a price. In other cases, it could be incentives around how people are paid or bonused. These are very powerful tools, but the key is it's not a one-size-fits-all.
All right, sir, you'll be the last question, I'm afraid. and because you had your hand up earlier. And then for those who still have questions, really, we do invite you to come up and chat with the panelists afterwards.
Thank you. My name is Dave. I'm with Queens Carbon. We're working on industrial decarbonization, including net zero concrete and cement. So talking about scope 3 emissions and practically speaking for your suppliers that are people that are looking to purchase stuff, do you mind talking a little bit about how you would assess the green premium and what you're willing to pay? And it's relatively easy to assess what you're paying for something. How do you assess the other pieces, and how do you tell them to trade off in a willingness to pay 10% more, 50% more, and how that works over time?
Anyone want to talk about green premiums?
Sure, I will. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Those are industries that are critical to decarbonize. And so I think for us, it's really, we've seen our suppliers are willing to pay a premium if they can see a long-term payback, right? And we're talking even 10, 20 years. So it's really about having that longer-term conversation again, and how do we think about the future outlook in a much more, longer-term horizon than we would have maybe in the past. So those have been very fruitful conversations for us, at least with our large suppliers.
If I may, I'll add a point too. This is where harks back to Nikki, your comment on policy and thought leadership is really important, is that in order for a green premium and companies to really lean in and have a willingness to pay, the accounting and the disclosures have to be mapped up so that it's not cost-based. Because right now, and this is part of what's happened with Microsoft with green steel, we're willing to pay a premium, but then if disclosures are cost-based and sustainability finance and accounting sort of lags from a regulatory perspective, you get caught in a negative scenario where, if you have to report based on cost-based and you're actually paying more, it looks like you're actually going backwards, even if you're doing the right thing. So this is where it takes a village, and it takes, I think, the really candid conversations around how do we make sure that we have measurement and verification, certification around what something really is, its green content, do that in the right way, aligning up with policy and regulators and leadership around the world. Microsoft is leaning in on this topic. For exactly this reason, because to create a virtuous economic mechanism, there has to be able to be credible price differentiation. To do that, you have to have the verification that something is what it says it is, and then you can't be that's the wrong word. You can't be punished. There you go. Punitive actions be punished. You can't then get in trouble for actually spending more if it's a measure on spend based. So that's another dynamic. I think that has to be fixed, and all of us in this room can help fix it.
All right. Well, first, I want to thank all of you for coming. I hope you leave with more tools in your pockets than you had before. I know you leave with some very interesting turns of phrase. I now know what carbon emotions, planetary twins, and I know how to swallow an elephant. And so I hope you enjoyed that also. If you would please join me in giving a big round of applause to the 4 panelists.
Thank you, David. You did a great job.